And I'm David.
On the series premiere of the Disaster Files, we will delving into the deadly maritime disaster of the Titanic.
Imagine it's April 1912 and you've just set foot on the RMS Titanic, the largest and most luxurious ship ever built. With all the grandeur around you, you're certain this voyage will be a memory for the ages. But just a few days later, the Unsinkable Titanic sinks to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, taking over 1,500 lives with it. How did this tragedy unfold? What really happened that fateful night could be more to the story than meets the eye. Today, we're diving deep into the mystery of the Titanic disaster.
Let's set the stage. The Titanic was the crown jewel of the White Star Line, a British shipping company that wanted to dominate the transatlantic passenger trade. To do this, they built the biggest, most opulent ship the world had ever seen. We're talking about a vessel nearly 900 feet long, with a gross tonnage of over 46,000. It was a floating city, equipped with everything from a grand staircase to a swimming pool to luxury suites that would make even today's five-star hotels look shabby.
Wow, dude. That's crazy. All right. But here's the thing. While the Titanic was a marvel of modern engineering, it wasn't exactly perfect. In fact, some say it was a disaster waiting to happen. The ship was designed with 16 watertight compartments, but the bulkheads separating these compartments didn't reach all the way to the top of the ship. The design flaw meant that if enough compartments flooded, the water would spill over from one to the next, creating the domino effect that could, and ultimately did, sink the ship.
So it's April 10th, 1912, and the Titanic sets sail from Southampton, England, bound for New York City. On board are some of the wealthiest people in the world, including John Jacob Astor IV and Benjamin Guggenheim, as well as thousands of immigrants seeking a new life in America. For the first few days, everything seems perfect. The weather is clear, the seas are calm, and the passengers are enjoying all the luxury the Titanic has to offer.
Well, seems like a pretty good trip then, eh? Seems like it's going to be a good time. But then, on the night of April 14, everything changes. The Titanic receives multiple warnings about icebergs in the area, but the ship continues to steam ahead at nearly full speed, 22.5 knots. This is where things get murky. Why didn't the crew slow down? Some say it was because Captain Edward Smith wanted to make a name for himself by arriving in New York ahead of schedule. Others believe the Titanic was trying to set a speed record crossing the Atlantic.
At 11:40 p.m., disaster strikes. The Titanic collides with an iceberg on its starboard side. The impact isn't enough to immediately alarm the passengers, but beneath the surface, the iceberg tears open the hull, causing water to flood into 5 of the ship's watertight compartments. The Titanic was only designed to stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, so with 5 breached, the ship is doomed.
Jeez, glad we're not on that ship.
Yeah.
And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Captain Smith, the crew, and even the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, quickly realize that the Titanic is sinking. But they don't tell the passengers right away. Instead, they start lowering the lifeboats. But here's the kicker. The Titanic only had enough lifeboats for about half the people on board. And the lifeboats they did have, they weren't even filled to capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Some were launched with only a dozen people in them, even though they could hold 65.
The situation quickly descends into chaos. Women and children are given priority for the lifeboats, but the process is disorganized. There are reports of men dressing as women to secure a spot on a lifeboat, while others stand back and let the lifeboats leave half empty, believing the Titanic can't possibly sink. By 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat is launched, leaving over 1,500 people still on board the sinking ship.
Tragedy. Now at 2:20 a.m., the Titanic breaks apart and disappears beneath the waves. For the hundreds of people still in the water, the freezing temperatures of the North Atlantic quickly became deadly. Most die from hypothermia within minutes. Those who survive are left floating on the lifeboats, watching as the ship of dreams vanishes into the abyss.
By the time the RMS Carpathia arrives at around 4 a.m., the scene is grim. Only 706 people are rescued. The rest are lost to the sea. The Titanic disaster is one of the deadliest maritime tragedies in history. But what if I told you there might be more to the story than just a tragic accident? What if there was something more sinister at play?
Ever since I was little, I always had a very strong connection to the Titanic. Every single picture, every single photograph, a doco, dreams, flashes that I would have about being on the Titanic took me back to that very moment, the feeling, the coldness, the looming, and the fight for survival. The majestic of that boat, I see it and I still watch it go into the water on shows that talk about the Titanic, and I get this goosebump feeling of travelling to New York and the excitement about going to America to start a new life. Those memories got deeper and deeper. Every year on April 12th, I would wake up in this freezing cold panic. For many years I did this, for many, many years, and it would take me back to that very moment of when that ship went down. I believe I survived the Titanic, and when I was about 16, I had this memory that my name was Amy, and I was a second-class citizen. And what I did is I actually did research into it. I remember going to an exhibition at the Brisbane Museum, and I was looking through the list, and lo and behold, there was a lady called Amy Stanley who survived the Titanic. What I later found out is that there was a necklace that was recovered from the Titanic, and it had Amy on it. And it is the exact same way that I would write my name, with the curls, with the A and how the Y curled around. It was hauntingly similar. She ended up surviving, remarrying in America. She died in 1955, and that is my memory of...
That's right, folks. There are a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding the Titanic. Some of them are pretty wild. But hey, this is Disaster Files, so let's take a look at a few.
One of the most popular theories is that the Titanic wasn't the Titanic at Alit, was actually her sister ship, the RMS Olympic, in disguise. According to this theory, the Olympic had been badly damaged in a collision the year before, and the White Star Line swapped it with the Titanic as part of an elaborate insurance scam. The idea was that they would intentionally sink the damaged Olympic, disguised as the Titanic, and collect the insurance money.
It's quite a scam they got going there, Hato.
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you know, there's some evidence to back it up. For one, there were some subtle differences between the Titanic and the Olympic, like the number of portholes. I'm reading again. Stuff it. Portholes. Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But there's some evidence to back it up.
Okay.
For one, the subtle differences between the Titanic and the Olympic, like the number of portholes on certain decks. Some people claim the photos taken before the Titanic set sail show a ship that looks more like the Olympic than the Titanic. What? And get this, several crew members who were supposed to sail on the Titanic suddenly cancelled at the last minute. Do they know something we don't? I think so.
Another theory suggests that the Titanic was sunk to eliminate opposition to the creation of the Federal Reserve. Some of the richest men in America were on board the Titanic, including John Jacob Astor IV, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. All three were opposed to the creation of the Federal Reserve, and all three died in the disaster. According to this theory, the Titanic was deliberately sunk to remove these powerful men and pave the way for the establishment of the Federal Reserve.
That is quite the coincidence, Hato.
Yeah.
Sounds a little sus. Let's keep digging. And then there's the mummy's curse. Have you heard this one?
No.
Well, guess what? According to a legend, a cursed Egyptian mummy was being transported on the Titanic, and its presence brought doom to the ship. The so-called unlucky mummy had a reputation for causing disaster wherever it went, and some believe it was responsible for the sinking of the Titanic. Of course, there's no solid evidence that the mummy was actually on board, but it's a fun theory to think about. Yeah.
Conspiracy theories aside, there's no denying that the Titanic disaster was a perfect storm of bad decisions, human error, and sheer bad luck. The ship was traveling too fast through iceberg-infested waters, the crew was slow to react, and the lifeboat situation was a complete mess. Even today, over a century later, we're still learning new things about what really happened that night.
Wow. For example, in 1985, when Dr. Robert Ballard and his team discovered the wreck of the Titanic, they found the ship had actually split into two before sinking, a detail that wasn't widely known until then. And in recent years, researchers have uncovered evidence that a coal fire in one of the ship's bunkers might have weakened the hull, making it more vulnerable to an iceberg.
So, was the Titanic disaster just a tragic accident? Or was there something more to it? We may never know for sure. But what we do know is that the story of the Titanic has captured the imagination of people all over the world. It's a story of hubris, tragedy, and the enduring power of the sea.
So what do you think? Was the Titanic doomed from the start? Or is there more to this story?
We'll leave that for you to decide. But one thing's for sure, whether it was a case of bad luck or a carefully orchestrated plot, the Titanic disaster will remain one of the greatest mysteries in history.
And that's going to do it for this episode of the Disaster Files. And if you liked what you saw, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the history's greatest mysteries.
What disaster do you want to see next?